Chapter 51 Ritual Magic of Grounding Gas. Solve the bill by magic. Do you want to curse the creditors directly or forge banknotes? I can't solve the problem, but I can solve you. All kinds of ideas jumped in Klein's mind, and the look at old Neil became a little wrong. He seriously considered the possibility of calling the police. No. Informing the night watchman teamed, old Neil glanced at him and said grumpily, "From your eyes, I saw ignorance, stupidity, and weak and shameful trust. Didn't Dunn tell you the motto of spying on the secret man? Do whatever you want, but don't hurt." Although this motto first came from the inside of a secret and evil organization, the Moss Pennant Society, the extraordinary people who chose the road of spying on the secret people proved its correctness with their own experience. As long as they strictly abide by it and are full of awe, the risk of losing control will be minimized, and the opposite inference will also be established. Your doubt is an insult to me and the spy. I'm sorry. Klein did not hesitate to apologize. He really forgot the adage that Dunsmith once mentioned. Old Neil didn't really angry, quickly walked over and said, "Unfortunately, there are too few extraordinary people who choose soothsayers, and there is no corresponding motto to help you. But I have the diary of Roselle the Great." Well, strictly observing the motto itself smells like acting. Klein suddenly had an association and nodded his head as if thinking. Old Neil didn't say anything more, but took away the vases and other things on the heavy round table and put them in the corner. Then, he took out a ladisolic red and a deep black candle from a small silver box and casually explained, "If ordinary people want to try ritual magic, they must choose the right date and time according to the astrological results or through the corresponding manuals, such as Sunday symbolizing the goddess, such as the moon dominated by him. But for us extraordinary people, especially those who are good at this, these are not necessary. Our vigorous spirituality and our powerful spirit body are the most critical elements. Of course, if you are not sure about the ritual magic you want to try, choosing the right date and time can effectively improve the success rate. Ah yes, there is a premise that you must keep in mind and strictly abide by." Old Neil put away 2 candles, tilting his body and looking at Klein. He said very seriously, "The low sequencers themselves are not strong enough. Almost all ritual magic that can be carried out is to pray for strength and ask for help from the outside. Therefore, only orthodox gods such as the goddess and the Lord of the Storm can be considered. Never try to communicate the unknown and unpredictable existence, even if someone believes in them, even if the recorded promise is full of temptation. Believe me, don't be lucky. As long as you try once, you will inevitably slide into the abyss. All efforts and all struggles can only slow down the speed and can't reverse the trend." "I'll keep that in mind," Klein replied with a heavy voice, but his heart was weak. His transit ceremony seems to be praying for strength from an unknown and unpredictable existence, and really got the power to make the senior extraordinary person upside down, unbelievable, and pull them into the fog. Well, he should be a senior extraordinary person. Thankfully, I'm not crazy, and there's no sign of losing control. Worried about this matter, he actively changed the subject. "So, the night watchman had better ask the goddess for help? If you want to pray to the Lord of the Storm, no one will stop you, but he may not respond or respond maliciously, which will distort the result of our ritual magic in an unpredictable direction." Old Neil successfully dismissed Klein's luck by joking, "There is no such thing as best, only must." Told, old Neil picked up the crimson candleway. Candles made of moonflowers and crimson sandalwood symbolized the crimson status of the goddess in ritual magic. He pointed to the dark black candleway. Candles made of night herbs, sleeping flowers, etc. symbolize the night. While speaking, he put the black one on the top left of the round table and the red one on the top right. Why are there only 2 candles symbolizing the goddess? She is also the mother of secrecy, the queen of adversity and fear, and the lord of sleep and silence. Old Neil smiled. "Yes, that's what I want you to ask." Before the fall, the relationship between the Mosaic Society and the Church was very good, and some of their ideas and achievements in ritual magic deeply influenced us. They think that everything is counted, and every number has spirituality. In ritual magic, 0 represents the unknown, chaos, symbolizing the state before the birth of the world. 1 represents the beginning, representing the original creator. 2 symbolizes the world born from him and the gods. 3 represents the contact between gods and matter, and everything takes shape. Here, we use 2 candles to symbolize the goddess and leave the 3rd one for ourselves. Which 2 candles and which 2 symbols should be used depends on the effect that ritual magic itself wants to achieve. Everything is born? Everything is 3? Klein couldn't help thinking about something he had come into contact with in his previous life. See him listen carefully. Old Neil took the 3rd candle away. "This is a candle symbolizing It's an ordinary candle with a little mint added. Remember, roses, lemons, mint, moonflowers, night herbs, and sleeping flowers are all loved and favored by the goddess. 3 candles, on the other hand, symbolize everyone's body, spirituality, and divinity. After the description, Old Neil put the third root in the center of the round table. He successively took out the prepared full moon essential oil, as well as a cauldron engraved with the dark emblem, a silver knife with gorgeous patterns, a glass of clear water, and a dish of coarse salt. For extraordinary people who are not good at ritual magic, at this time, they need bells, crystal balls, silver cups, incense, and other items to assist, but they are not used by voyeurs and diviners. These objects are enough. Old Neil put the parchment with the bill painted on it next to the cauldron directly below, and pressed a corner with a special quill pen. He sideways to Klein way. Ritual magic needs a clean and undisturbed spiritual environment, and this must be made by ourselves. The method is to enter meditation first, accumulate our spirit, and then guide our strength by auxiliary objects and build it around, such as the holy night powder I used in Riel Bieber's house, such as the ceremonial silver dagger I am about to use. In the whole process, we must determine the symbols and corresponding mantras according to the desired results. The mantras are best in Hermes, because the ancient Hermes language comes from nature, which is similar to the Gulang language and the ancient elf language. The effect is very direct, lacking the necessary concealment and protection, and it is easy to put users in danger. This is why it has been improved, but it is indeed more effective. Well, I'm going to concentrate on ritual magic, and I won't explain it to you again. Please pay attention to watching and listening, write down the questions, and ask me again when it's over. Okay. Klein stepped back and looked at Old Neil intently. Old Neil's eyes deepened rapidly, and invisible winds began to swirl around him. He was silent for a while, and according to the order from left to right and from top to bottom, he rubbed his mind and matter and lit 3 candles in turn. Then, he picked up the silver knife, inserted it into the coarse salt, and recited the mantra written in Hermes. I sanctify you, the blade of pure silver. I clean and purify you so that you can serve me in the ceremony. In the name of the goddess of the night and the Crimson Lord, you are consecrated. After short and powerful ancient words, Old Neil took out a silver knife, inserted it into the glass of water, and then lifted it up, pointing to the space outside the round table. He pointed the tip of the knife at the outer ring, then took his steps and walked around the round table. With every step, Klein could feel invisible forces bursting out from the silver knife. They were full of spirituality and connected with the air, forming a sealed wall. After a circle, the altar was isolated from the surrounding area. Old Neil stood in front of the round table, put down the silver knife, picked up the bottle of full moon essential oil, and dropped 3 drops into black, crimson, and ordinary candles respectively. The faint fog filled the air, and everything seemed mysterious. Old Neil put down the glass bottle, looked at the imitation parchment, and was silent for 2 minutes. Then he took a quill pen and drew a symbol of control on the bill, a square that framed everything, indicating that he controlled the debt. Then, he drew a cross to indicate elimination. Here, he took the imitation parchment in one hand, tapped the eyebrows in the other, and opened the second sight. An invisible and vigorous strength. Old Neil whispered, I pray for the power of the night. I pray for crimson power. I pray for the goddess care. Pray to bring me money to pay this bill. Night vanilla, a herb belonging to the red crescent. Please pass on your strength to my mantra. Moonflower, a herb belonging to the red moon. Please pass on your strength to my mantra. Klein beside was dumbfounded. In the mind, all kinds of ideas agitate each other. Such a mantra will do. Although it was written and read in Hermes, this is too direct, too simple, and too grounded, right? Will the goddess get angry and double the bill? At this time, the candlelight quickly brightened. Old Neil finished chanting, closed his eyes for 2 minutes, picked up the full moon essential oil, and dropped a drop on each of the 3 candles. Then, he grabbed the imitation parchment, put it close to the candle symbolizing I, lit it, and immediately threw it into the cauldron. Old Neil closed his eyes again, as if feeling the burning build. After a while, he opened his eyes and looked at the cauldron with the black emblem. He saw that the imitation parchment had completely burned, leaving only ashes. Praise the goddess. Old Neil lit his chest 4 times, painted it as a crimson moon, and then put out the candles in the opposite order from the beginning. After all this, he took a silver knife and poked the invisible wall around him. After a sudden gust of wind, Old Neil obviously relieved way. All right. That's good. Klein startled to ask. The bill is settled? How to solve it? I don't know. Anyway, it will be solved in a reasonable way. Old Neil's hand laughed at this. Klein don't know what expression and language to use to deal with. I assent that a little unreliable. Note 1. The magic in this chapter is adapted from Wicca's magic book. Chapter 52 audience. Stop thinking about the damn bill, and let's talk about ritual magic. Old Neil looked relaxed and put away candles, cauldrons, and silver knives. Klein wanted to shrug his shoulders like the Americans in his previous life, but he didn't do it in the end. He turned his attention back to the ritual magic itself, throwing out the detailed questions that he had doubted before, and got enough definite answers. For example, all the mantras recited have a certain format. As long as they are satisfied and the key meaning is clearly expressed in Hermes, other parts can be played at will. Of course, profane and disrespectful descriptions are absolutely forbidden. This occult course lasted until noon, and old Neil gently coughed 2 tracks. We must return to Zotland Street. Speaking of which, he vaguely complained, I missed the lovely breakfast to get those damn materials. Klein, funny and confused, looked around. Mr. Neil, don't you have a chef at home? Or the maid in charge of cooking? £12 a week is enough for several servants. According to the newspaper, under the condition of giving accommodation and food, an ordinary chef only needs a weekly salary of 12 to 15 souls, not even £1, and a handyman is cheaper, with a weekly salary of only 3 souls and 6 pence to 6 souls. Of course, you can't count on their cooking skills well, that's not true. With Mr. Neil still in debt of £30, it's normal not to invite chefs and servants. I seem to have asked the wrong question again. Klein, regret, old Neil, but don't mind to shake head away. I often try ritual magic at home and study extraordinary objects and corresponding documents. I won't and can't ask ordinary people to be cooks, footmen, and maids. I just ask people to clean them regularly. If they are not ordinary people, do you think they will be willing to do similar work? I seem to have asked a stupid question, perhaps because I won't do anything mysterious at home. Klein explained with self-mockery. Old Neil stood up early, put on a round felt hat, and walked outside muttering, I seem to smell the fragrant fried foie gras. When the bill is completely solved, I must have a good one. I'm sure I can eat a whole piece of roast pork with applesauce at noon. No, it's not enough. I must have another sausage with mashed potatoes. I'm hungry. Klein swallowed, quickly followed old Neil, and went to a nearby bus stop back to Zotland Street. Old Neil just got off the carriage and suddenly well said. What did I see? Goddess. What do I see? Suddenly, like a boy of 17 or 18, he quickly came to the side of the road and picked up an object. Klein was puzzled. After a closer look, he found that it was a well-made wallet. With his eyes and knowledge, it is difficult to tell whether this dark brown wallet is cowhide or sheepskin, only to notice that there is a small light blue coat of arms embroidered on it, and a white dove is flying on it. This is Klein's first impression, and from the second sight, he was stuck in a line of sight by the bills that swelled his wallet. That's a gold pound with black stripes on the gray background. At least 20 of them are facing up. Old Neil opened his wallet, pulled out the money, looked at it carefully, and suddenly he said, £10 notes, the respected founder and protector, William I. Oh, the goddess, 30 notes, and several £5, £1, and 5 soul notes. More than £300? This is a real huge sum of money. I may not be able to save so much money in 10 years. Klein's breathing becomes heavy involuntarily because of the high value of the gold pound. Finding such a wallet is just like finding a box of banknotes in the future. I don't know who dropped it, certainly not ordinary people. Klein calmly analyzed. Such a wallet obviously does not belong to a lady. Never mind who he is. Old Neil chuckled. It's not like we're trying to take possession of money that doesn't belong to us. Let's wait here. I think that gentleman will come back to look for it soon. It's not easy for anyone to give up. Klein secretly breathed a sigh of relief and had a new understanding of old Neil's moral quality. He was quite worried that the other party would use the money to pay the bill under the pretext of goddess gift, and he was thinking hard about how to stop it and how to persuade it. This is do whatever you want, but don't hurt. Klein suddenly had a little insight. After waiting for less than a minute on the street, they saw a luxurious four-wheeled carriage coming fast, and the light blue coat of arms on the side was a white dove with its wings spread. The carriage stopped, and a middle-aged man in a black suit and tie of the same color left the carriage, looked at the wallet, took off his hat, and saluted. Gentlemen, this should be my master's wallet. Your coat of arms proves everything, but I need to verify it again. This is responsible for everyone. Excuse me, how much money is in the wallet? Old Neil responded politely. The middle-aged man dazed, immediately self-deprecating laugh. As a housekeeper, I should know how much money is left in my master's wallet. Sorry, please allow me to ask. This is your freedom. Old Neil made a gesture of invitation. The middle-aged man returned to the carriage and exchanged a few words with the people inside through the window. He approached Klein and old Neil again, smiled and said, More than £300, less than £350. My master doesn't remember the exact amount. I don't remember. It's really a big dog. If I had so much money, I must have counted it over and over again. Klein is full of envy. Old Neil ordered his head and handed back his wallet. The goddess proves that this belongs to you. The middle-aged man took the wallet, probably counted it, and then pulled out 3 £10 bills from it. My master is Sir de Ville, and he says that your quality makes him admire. This is the reward that an honest person should get. Please don't refuse. Sir DeVille? Sir Dwell, who set up the Dwell Trust Company to provide low-cost rental housing for low-income workers. Klein suddenly remembered the name. He is a Jazz who is respected by his brother Benson and thinks that things are not close to reality. Thanks to Sir, he is a kind and generous gentleman. Old Neil didn't mention it and took the 3 notes. After watching Sir DeVille's carriage go away, he saw that there was no one around. So he turned to Klein, flicked the money and smiled a track. £30. The bill is settled. I said that it will be solved in a reasonable way. This is the power of magic. God, TM magic power. This will do. Klein was dumbfounded again, slow for a few minutes, into the stairs, climbed to the security company. He wondered and asked, Mr. Neil, why don't you pray for more money? Don't be greedy, especially when performing ritual magic. Temperance is the key factor for every secret-peeping person to live long enough. Old Neil explained cheerfully. In the huge banquet hall, burning candles are erected on several chandeliers, which give off a pleasant fragrance and accumulate a light that is not inferior to that of gas lamps. There are many delicious foods such as fried foie gras, grilled steak, roasted chicken, fried solefish, Dixie oysters, stewed lamb, cream soup, and so on long tables. In addition, there are bottles of misty champagne, Ormer wine, and South Wales red wine, which exude attractive colors under the light. A servant with a red vest carries a plate with a crystal cup and shuttles between gentlemen and ladies dressed up or elegant or gorgeous. Audrey Hall wore a light white dress with a stand-up collar, high waist, and leg sleeves. Her upper body was tightly tied, and her waist was extremely thin. The multi-level cake cutting was perfectly supported by whale hoops. Her long blonde hair is elegantly coiled. Her earrings, necklaces, and rings are all shining brightly, and at her feet are a pair of white dancing shoes inlaid with roses and diamonds. There are 4, 5, or 6 petticoats in it. Audrey touched the skirt with her right hand with white gauze gloves. She is holding a glass of sparkling champagne in her left hand. Audrey didn't stay in the center of the party and become the focus of everyone as usual, but avoided the excitement and stood quietly in the shadow of the curtain on the French window. She took a sip of champagne and looked at the people in front of her with a gesture that did not belong here. Earl Wolf's youngest son is chatting with Viscount Kennard's daughter. He likes to strengthen his tone by waving his form. Well, the greater the amplitude of his waving, the less credible the content of his speech. This is a verified conclusion. He can't help raising himself and belittling others, but it is difficult to control his guilty conscience, which will be expressed from his way of speaking and body language. Mrs. Della hid her laughter with her left hand again and again today. Well, I see. She is showing off the pure aquamarine on her left hand. Her husband, Duke Negan, is not far away discussing the situation with several conservative nobles. Since the banquet, he has only actively looked for his Lady Della once. They hardly make real eye contact. Maybe, well, they're not as loving as they seem. Mrs. Parnice was teased by Baron Larry 7 times, which is normal and not surprising, but why did she look at her husband with guilty eyes? Well, they separated. No, everywhere they went can lead to the garden. In this extravagant banquet, Audrey saw many details that she never paid attention to. For a moment, she almost really believed that she was watching a play. Everyone is a good dramatist. She sighed silently, her eyes cold. At this moment, she suddenly felt something, suddenly turned her head and looked at the spacious balcony outside the landing window, looking at the dark corner of the spacious balcony. In that shadow, a big golden retriever dog sat quietly, looking at it in peace, looking at Audrey, half of his body hidden in the darkness. Susie. Audrey's mouth twitched, and her expression instantly collapsed, and she could no longer maintain the state of audience. Chapter 53. The Listener on the Stormy Sea. An ancient 3-masted sailboat is ups and downs with the waves. Its speed is not fast, and its volume is not big enough. It is like leaving the dead leaves of trees in the disaster scene that is integrated with the sea on this day. However, no matter how rampant the hurricane is and how terrible the waves are, it sails safely without tilting. Alger Wilson stood on the empty deck, watching the mountains and waves around him, wondering what he was thinking. It's Monday again. He whispered quietly. It was a day belonging to Mother Earth, and it was the beginning of a new round of prosperity and decline. But for Alger, it has another meaning, which belongs to a mysterious existence shrouded in gray mist forever. At least I haven't become crazy. He looked back and smiled at himself. This time, one of his few crew members leaned over and asked, Your Eminence, what is the goal of our voyage? Alger looked around, toned no ups and downs to answer. Chasing a listener of the Aurora Society. The storm dispersed, the fog filled, and there were artillery positions on the strange sailing boat that still did not conform to the trend of the times. An 8 or 9-year-old boy with soft yellow hair looked at the undisciplined pirates around him in fear, watching them enjoy a vat of beer, watching them swing around with the help of ropes, watching them ridicule each other and even punching each other. He turned to the black man standing in the shadows, low voice way. Father, where are we going? 5 days ago, he met his father for the first time since he remembered, calling himself the father of the adventurer. If it weren't for the oil painting left by his mother, which proved the identity of the other party, and if the orphanage was opening the door for himself, he would never want to leave his hometown and follow this almost strange close relative. The man standing in the shadow lowered his head, looked at his son, and replied kindly, "Jack, I'll take you to a sacred place, the sanctuary, where the Creator once lived." "Is that the kingdom of God?" "We mortals can only go in if we are blessed." Little Jack was well taught by his mother, and had enough common sense. At this time, he was surprised and afraid. The man standing in the shadow has an unforgettable face with deep lines, which is like a stone carving completed by the best master. He put his hand to his ear, posing as a listener, and answered in an almost talking voice, "Jack, mortal is a wrong concept. The Creator created this world. He is everywhere. He exists in every living thing. Therefore, everything has divinity, and if it is rich enough, it can become an angel. Now the 7 false gods are just more powerful angels. You see, I can hear the teachings of the Creator now. What an extraordinary revelation. Life is just a spiritual journey. When the spirit is strong enough and tough enough, we can find our own divinity and merge with more divinities." Little Jack didn't understand this complicated description, shook his head, and asked another question that he hadn't had time to ask before. "Father, I heard from my mother that after the Creator created this world, he divided into all things and did not actually exist. Then why is there his sanctuary?" As a child of 7 or 8 years old, his logic is clear enough. The man whose face lines are like carvings was dazed, and his head tilted a few minutes, as if he heard more whispers. Suddenly, he lay down, kneeling on the deck, and his exposed skin highlighted one black thing after another. He put his hands over his head, his face twisted to an abnormal state, and shouted in great pain, "They are lying." After lunch, after old Neil promised that he would bring himself to the underground market next time, Klein slowly returned to Blackthorn Security Company, considering whether to read literature and practice his ability in the civilian office, or continue to wander out and play the soothsayer in the divination club while Captain Dunn has not banned it. However, before he could make a decision, he saw Dunsmith coming in from the outer room, wearing a black trench coat and a top hat. "Captain, what's the situation?" Klein thought about the whereabouts of Antigone's family notes and asked with concern. Dunn gray eyes don't see any tired way. It has been confirmed by many parties that the notes of the Antigonus family are in the hands of Riel Bieber, but he has disappeared completely. I've told the night watchman teams about this by telegraph, asking them to pay close attention to various ports and steam train stations. The first batch of portraits printed were also mailed out yesterday afternoon and will be published in major newspapers. I wish I had a telephone, a fax machine, a surveillance camera, and big data at this time. Unfortunately, I only know how to use it, and I only know a little about the principle. Klein breathed silently. However, in any case, we have found the whereabouts of the note, which belongs to you. Of course, it needs further confirmation. I have sent a telegram to the parish of Backlander, asking them to send someone to escort the number 2-049 seal, which used to belong to the Antigonus family. It can help us know whether Riel Bieber is a descendant of the Antigonus family. The 2 seal is dangerous. Use it carefully and sparingly. Klein wanted to ask curiously what this seal is, what special abilities it has, and where the danger is, but he immediately remembered that he was not confidential enough and had to give up. May the goddess bless us. Klein tapped his chest 4 times and drew a full moon. Dunn opened the door of his office and nodded slightly. "Goddess has been protecting us, Klein. If you didn't choose Soothsayer before, you should be able to become a regular player and choose Sleepless when this matter is confirmed. What a pity. Frankly speaking, I have never understood why you chose Soothsayer. Although Body Receiver is irresistible, you have met daily and should understand how psychic is. For this question, Klein prepared the answer from the beginning, but Dunn never asked and only casually mentioned it until now. He organized the language way. What I consider is that soothsayers and voyeurs belong to auxiliary extraordinary people, so they don't always have to face the enemy, which is too dangerous. And you and old Neil also said that in mysterious and extraordinary fields, curiosity and exploration often bring terrible consequences. The voyeur's voyeur description makes me feel worried, so... I was just an ordinary one not long ago. I have to say that this is an unexpected but reasonable answer." Dunn rubbed his forehead and gave a chuckle. He turned half-body. Gray eyes looked Klein up and down deeply. "During this time, you will continue to go out, no longer limited to the route from Welch's home to Iron Cross Street. Maybe you can sense that note and help us determine the whereabouts of Riel Bieber." "Okay." Klein found that he didn't have to struggle. He left and turned. The in the mind began to count. 3, 2, wait a minute. Dunn began to shout. Klein looked back and smiled. "Captain, is there anything else?" Dunn coughed a track. "Well, auxiliary extraordinary people sometimes have to face the enemy. Although soothsayers sounds like they can avoid these things, We can't neglect them. You must keep practicing firearms and strengthen your strength in a planned way. This is exactly what I am trying to do. Klein pointed out. I'm out. Okay, wait a minute. Dunn stopped him again, thinking and saying, maybe I should consider hiring a fighting teacher for you. Of course, the premise of this matter is that you become a regular team member. Klein carefully asked, Captain, is there anything else? No more. Seeing Klein's incredulous eyes, Dunn shook his head and smiled faintly, emphasizing again, it's really gone. Klein just walked out of the partition, said goodbye to Luoshan, Mrs. Ariana and others, practiced at the shooting club first, and then wandered around for a full hour, earnestly completing the task assigned by the captain. After all this, he came to the divination club and saw the beautiful Ms. Angelica reading a magazine leisurely. Family? Klein said the names silently, walked over with a cane, smiled and said hello. Good afternoon, Ms. Angelica. Good afternoon, Mr. Moridi. Angelica put down the magazine unhurriedly, got up and said, not long after you left yesterday, Mr. Graces came. He just recovered from a serious illness. Klein relieved, smile away. This is really a happy thing. Hearing these words, I have been quietly observing his Angelica could not help but lower her voice and asked curiously, Mr. Graces said that you are a very, very, very magical doctor, right? What? Klein looked at the lady opposite in astonishment, suspecting that he was hearing voices. Where can I see that I am a doctor? I didn't even know. Chapter 50 for the first diviner. See, Klein looked surprised. Angelica suddenly a little shaken. Isn't it? Mr. Graces said that you can see that there is a disease hidden in his lungs, just by observation. The more she talked, the more she whispered and finally closed her mouth. Observation? Black eyebrows? Klein suddenly shook his head. No way. I think Mr. Graces misunderstood. He was going to be so perfunctory, but it suddenly occurred to him that no one was looking for his divination yesterday afternoon, which led to a very bad process of playing the role of soothsayer. So, he had a sharp brain turn and explained briefly, this is actually a kind of divination. Divination? But Mr. Graces only mentioned that you observe his face. Is this divination? Angelica asked in surprise and doubt. Klein calmly laughed. As a member of the divination club, you should know your palm, right? Palmistry is not the patent of the big-eating empire. Even on the earth, India and old Europe have developed a set of theories respectively, not to mention that today it is a world with extraordinary power. Yes, but you didn't seem to read his palm, did you? Secretly observed? Angelica asked curiously. I'm looking at faces. Klein spun. There is no essential difference between its principle and palm reading. Really? Angelica's eyes were full of disbelief. Klein, for the development of soothsayer career, with a chuckle, pretending to think, raised his hand and tapped the eyebrows twice. Looking intently, Angelica's aura appeared in his eyes. His head was purple, his hands and feet were red, and his throat was blue. There was nothing wrong with his health, but his colors were slightly dim, but it was a sign of normal exhaustion. Klein looked at each other's emotions again, only to see orange mixed with a little red and blue, that is warm with a little excitement and a little thinking. Fortunately, it was found that there was no abnormal situation, and Klein planned to close second sight. At this moment, he suddenly saw Angelica's emotional color in the depths, hiding a thick gray. Besides, she also lacks a little white positivity. Klein nodded thoughtfully. Mr. Moridi, are you looking at my face? Seeing the sudden silence of the young gentleman wearing a black suit in front of him and looking at himself carefully, Angelica was keenly aware of something, half curious and half worried, and asked. Klein didn't answer immediately, but tapped the eyebrows again, looking intently. Just when Angelica was a little upset, he spoke gently. Ms. Angelica, some are sad and some are painful. Don't seal it in your heart. Angelica's eyes widened and her mouth opened, but she couldn't speak. She looked at Klein, who wore a top hat and had obvious academic temperament, and heard the other party say in a low, soothing and warm voice, you need a mountain climbing, a tennis match, or a sad drama to make your body tired from exercise, to let your tears flow without cover, and then to cry and scream, and to completely explode those emotions. This is also very helpful for your health. When the words were heard, Angelica seemed to become a statue, standing there motionless. She blinked hard, lowered her head in panic, and said in a muffled voice, Thank you for your advice. There seem to be many members today. Klein didn't say anything more, just like he didn't do any divination just now, and looked sideways at the conference room at the end of the corridor. Sunday afternoon, at least 50 members. Angelica's voice is still a little hoarse, and the description is only a few key words. She paused. Speaking speed gradually returned to normal. Do you want black tea or coffee? She bought black tea. Klein nodded slightly, took off his hat politely, and then walked slowly to the conference room. It was not until he disappeared by the door that Angelica slowly spat out a sigh. The meeting room of the Divination Club is very large, almost twice as large as the classroom of Klein High School. Usually there are only 5 or 6 members here, which is very empty. At this time, Dozens of soothsayers sit in different positions in twos and threes, and most of the space is filled at once. The sun shines through several protruding windows, and members either discuss in a low voice, or gather around Heiner's Vincent for advice, or bury themselves in drills and try divination, or drink coffee and read newspapers alone. Such a picture gives Klein a feeling of returning to the Earth's student days. But it was more lively and noisy at that time, and there was no such quiet taste. He looked around and didn't see Gracis and Edward Steve, two acquaintances, so he took a public divination textbook at random, found a corner, and read it leisurely. After a while, Angelica came in with a cup of black tea and put it on the table in front of Klein. She was about to leave quietly when she saw Mr. Meridi untie a unique silver chain from the cuff of his left hand, with a pure topaz hanging on it. What is he going to do? Angelica unconsciously slowed down and stared at Klein. Klein held the silver chain in his left hand and dropped the topaz straight on the cup of Zybe black tea, so that it would only touch the surface of the liquid by a little. He looked quietly and half closed his eyes, and the atmosphere around him suddenly became quiet. The pure topaz moved slightly and rotated clockwise with a unique silver chain. Seeing this, Angelica only felt that Mr. Meridi was extremely mysterious. Your black tea is not bad. Klein opened his eyes and whispered with a smile that what he just did was made on purpose, and he showed it to Angelica on purpose. If someone wants to find their own divination soon, Angelica, who is in charge of reception and recommendation, is actually a very key factor. Since he wants to play the role of soothsayer, Klein no longer has any concerns and really puts himself into this identity. Yes, Mr. Venners is very picky about the quality of black tea. Become a reality. Therefore, different occupations must have their own characteristics and be relatively balanced. But so far, no signs of digitization have been found, and there is no development of tasks. This factor is temporarily suspended and may be extremely low. Second, the bottom rule of this world is balance, and the creator created this place with balance as the core. Third, the potions of the same sequence are at the same energy level, which is the best state found by the ancestors after exploration and summary. If it exceeds this energy level, it is easy to collapse out of control, and if it is too low, it can't get the extraordinary power it wants. Therefore, under a certain energy level on the one hand, it will be stronger, on the other hand, it will naturally be weaker. Fourth, all things are homologous, all of which are differentiated from the creator and belong to the fragments of the creator, and the potential meaning of mutual complementarity is that each has its own problems. At present, the third and fourth reasons are preferred, but the latter one stems from the uncertain myth and can only be used as a reference. First, under the guidance of the third type, it is verified through current learning and subsequent discoveries. Here, Klein has written 2 full pages, but he didn't stop and put pen to paper to sort out new questions. From today's study, my transfer ceremony is a typical ritual magic. Similar ritual magic can be divided into 3 parts. The first part is the sacrificial part that pleases or arouses the corresponding interest. The second part is the mantra part that describes the specific object of prayer. The third part is the essence of what help you want. This needs to be clarified by formatted corresponding language and certain symbols. Starting from this, analyzing the transshipment ceremony can find an obvious problem, and there is no third part. It has a sacrificial part where the staple food is placed and 4 steps are taken counterclockwise to form a square, and there are also mantras that indicate the direction of prayer, such as Fuxing Xianhuang Xianzuan. But its follow-up only closed its eyes and waited, and did not describe the purpose of the ceremony as transshipment. That is to say, what this so-called transit ceremony wants to pray for, the corresponding existence is not clear at all, and it can only be freely played. Pit Dad. Isn't the TM of the minutes of Qin and Han mysteries too Pit? I must have been out of my mind at that time, so I thought about giving it a try. Klein stopped his pen, took 2 breaths, and tried to calm himself down to call. He spit out polluted air, continued to comb away. Consider redesigning the ceremony to make it complete, and the goal of prayer is to return to the earth and return to the world where parents and relatives live. Then the question is that being free to play? Or does it imply a deep purpose? Further, is the one pointed by descriptive mantras on the earth and the one pointed by this world the same existence? If so, the difference in effect between the first ceremony and the second ceremony can be explained as free play. Then the second and third ceremonies can go to the fog and connect justice and hanging people upside down, and there is almost no difference. Why? After the fourth ceremony tomorrow afternoon proves to be stable and repeated, it means that the effect is solidified, which means that the goal of prayer is implied in the link that I still don't know. In this way, adding new descriptions and new prayers will not have a clear response, and even it will only make the ceremony chaotic and produce bad results. The difference between the first time and the follow-up, does it mean that the world you are in will lead to different responses when the object of prayer remains unchanged? Just like using different interfaces. How can I design it to achieve the effect I want? If you think that the existence of the first and the last 2 points is different, some of the previous problems can be fully explained, but similarly, the stability and constancy of the second and third times means the implication of praying for the goal, and the change can't be started for the time being. The most crucial point is, who is the existence that points to, where is it, and how can it not give me any hints and guidance? Is he in the depths of the foggy whirl? Hey, is it possible to treat him as a sleeping existence, give him some stimulation and get fixed feedback, and besides, he won't interfere and influence me? Then you can design different rituals to stimulate, sum up the law of feedback, and finally find the correct regression method. But the problem is that if he is not asleep, all the temptations may lead to terrible things, which is very dangerous. The first test must be careful enough to avoid irritation from the design. It's really nerve-wracking, and it needs further study. Klein sighed and concluded. After that, he recorded other things in bits and pieces. There are always invisible voices echoing in my ears, screaming Hornachis and, is it pronounced Ferregra or Ferregra? Hanachis is a mountain range that spans the Kingdom of Ruan and the Republic of Intis, and its main peak is more than 6,000 meters high. According to the notes of the Antigone family, in the Quaternary, there was a country of night. Is there any relationship between the country of the night and the goddess of the night? Family members or hostile forces? Is there a reason why the Antigonus family was destroyed by the Church of the Goddess of the Night? The whisper I heard came from that note, from the screams of the Antigone family for 1,000 or 2 years. Ferragamo, well, Ferragamo, what does it mean? An interesting question. Can leave a note like that, leaving 2-049 seal, indicating that the Antigone family has mastered quite a powerful, extraordinary power. So, what is the sequence approach in their hands? Complete or incomplete? It's a bit of a coincidence to find the notes in Riel Bieber's hands, but there is no trace of arrangement. Is it really a fetter of fate? One by one, the thoughts fell on the pen, and Klein wrote about the things he encountered during this time and his own speculation. This writing is a full 4 pages, with both sides tear it. Klein suddenly tore down these 4 pages and read them several times from beginning to end, sometimes circled with a pen, and sometimes added a few words. Time flies, and the red crescent is briefly covered by dark clouds. Klein picks up the pocket watch on the table, clicks it open, and takes a look. He put down his pocket watch, took out a box of matches in the drawer, brushed a bright one, and approached the 4 pages of notes. The orange flame bit the paper and spread quickly. Klein put these 4 pages of notes on the wooden trash can and saw the ashes floating and falling. He let go of his fingers and let the paper fall, but in 10 seconds, everything disappeared. Only the slightly hovering ashes and the scorch marks at the bottom of the barrel told the past. Because of the secret diary of Roselle the Great, Klein dared not leave any evidence that he could write Chinese. If old Neil and others found those 4 pieces of paper just now, things would be unclear. When writing confidential questions, whether in Luen, Gufasak, or Hermes, Klein is worried that the one who is staring at him in his dream will see and interpret the contents. Therefore, he writes in Chinese to sort out and summarize, and when he finishes this task, he burns the paper without leaving any trace, and because he couldn't save it, he made a plan for himself, which was to summarize it once a week to avoid forgetting it. Looking at all the ashes, Klein pulled out a blank sheet of paper and looked up and wrote, "Dear Mentor." He will write to ask Cohen Quinton, a senior associate professor, if he has any historical information about the main peak of Hornachis. Chapter 58. A train of thought. The next day, Monday morning, Klein, who took a break from work, didn't go out, but gave Melissa the letter to his tutor Cohen Quinton and the excess stamp fee, and entrusted his sister to deliver it at the post office near Tianjin Technical School. After breakfast, he made up for the lack of sleep during work leisurely, and didn't get up again until near noon when his stomach was growling, after heating last night's leftovers and eating a loaf of oatmeal bread. Klein took a newspaper and entered the bathroom in the bathroom on the 2nd floor. Whenever this happens, he can't help sighing that there is no mobile phone. 7 or 8 minutes later, he came out refreshed, washed his hands, went back to the bedroom and locked the door. Then, Klein drew the curtains, lit the gas lamp, meditated for half an hour, practiced second sight, pendulum and staff for half an hour, and reviewed the occult knowledge for 1 hour by remembering that after doing these things, he tore the old newspapers into dozens of groups, wrote the names of materials such as moon flower candle and full moon essential oil, respectively, and simulated the process of ritual magic step by step to grasp the details. He did not intend to try ritual magic rashly until he was truly proficient and learn more, because it would waste materials and easily lead to danger. Over and over again, Klein picked up a silvery white pocket watch with tendrils, opened it and looked at it. It was just after 2:45. He thought about it for a few seconds, took the waste newspaper to the kitchen on the 1st floor, and burned it. He used this to adjust his state and prepare for the tarot party. Locking the bedroom door again, Klein didn't wait for 3 o'clock and planned to enter the fog ahead of time. He wants to take this opportunity to explore there. Just as Klein stood in the empty room and was about to start walking counterclockwise, he suddenly thought of one thing from worrying about whether justice and hanging upside down had entered a suitable environment and would be disturbed and discovered by others. He said that we should find a way to make justice and hanging upside down ask for leave in advance and miss the party if they really can't get away or encounter other situations. For the former Klein, this is an almost unsolvable problem. He can't manually drive an instant messaging network in another world, and the cable telegraph method will expose himself. Now, he found inspiration from ritual magic. With the help of external ritual magic, we all pray for the help of different beings. Similar mantras will definitely have a clear direction at the beginning, such as the God of the Night and the Lord of Crimson, such as the description of those unknown and secret beings. Then can I modify the mantra so that the description at the beginning points to me? Point to me. In this way, I can get the corresponding information even if the ceremony of justice and hanging people upside down is held in a foreign country. Klein's spirit suddenly interrupted, began to analyze the feasibility of this method. Two difficulties. First, I am not a high sequencer who is strong enough. Even if the description of the mantra does point to me, I am unlikely to receive a request. Second, how to ensure that the description of the mantra can accurately point to me and ensure that it will not miss and run wrong and hit other unknown beings that meet the description, which will bring great danger. Klein paced back and forth, contemplating possible solutions. Silent footsteps. He turned round and round, naturally linked this matter to the mysterious world above the fog. I can't receive the request, which doesn't mean that the fog can't work. The combination of it and the Crimson Star can directly pull people into space, regardless of the distance. Can consider when directional description will I and the mysterious space associated together. According to this line of reasoning, although I can't receive the request immediately when the other party holds the ceremony, I can see the corresponding information as long as I enter the fog. Simply put, it is the difference between online and offline messages of QQ. The more Klein thinks about it, the more excited he is, and he thinks this idea can be tried. Well, what description should I use to accurately point to me and point to the foggy world? He began to consider specific details. In fact, he has a mantra that is sure to succeed, that is, the pure Wen phonetic translation of Fu Xing Xian Huang Tianzun, but the problem is that this will lead him to lose control over the fog and lose his dominant position, which can only be ruled out. A fool from another world. No, it's accurate enough. There will be almost no other existence that meets the requirements, but it will expose my biggest secret. Klein thought of one mantra after another, but he denied himself. 7 or 8 minutes later, he finally hammered out the first directional description in the mantra, a fool who does not belong to this era. This is obviously not accurate enough, and Klein quickly added, the mysterious master above the fog. The combination of the two can almost be limited to him, and the fog is tied to himself. Almost, it doesn't rule out that there are multiple spaces and multiple masters above the fog, and it doesn't rule out that this description points to the spiritual world. Klein frowned and planned to add another insurance. Well, he thought about it for a full minute and finally thought about the last paragraph. The yellow and black king in charge of good luck. This is an approximate free translation of blessing the yellow god. If it is the only one, it is likely to go wrong and provoke unknown dangers. However, with the restrictions of the previous 2 articles, with the example of entering the fog by similar mantras, the object described can be completely locked. According to these 3 paragraphs, Klein doesn't know whether it will work, but it will certainly not attract the attention of other beings and put justice and hanging people upside down in danger. Klein long spit a sigh of relief. Say it again. Want a good mantra. Don't belong to this era of fools. You are the mysterious master above the fog, and you are the yellow and black king in charge of good luck. He nodded invisibly, took out his pocket watch and set the time. It's 2:58. Klein stopped thinking about it, put away his pocket watch, and went into meditation. With a mantra, he took 4 steps counterclockwise and became a square. The loudest noise and the most touching screams rang again, and he felt a headache more unbearable than taking the soothsayer potion. This is different from the severe pain in the head, which makes people manic, irrational, and chaotic. Klein controlled himself by meditating, trying not to listen. Those whispers and whispers receded like a flood. His body became lighter, his spirituality became lighter, and everything drifted. Endless fog appeared in his sight, and the crimson stars were far or near, just like eyes. Above the fog, the palace towering like a giant's residence still stands, which seems to have existed here for millions of years. Klein just moved his heart, and his figure disappeared in situ, and he sat down on the bronze long table with 22 high-backed chairs. The effect of the ceremony is really fixed. He whispered a word and tapped the eyebrows, making the gray fog cover himself, which is thicker than before. According to the description of hanging upside down, if justice becomes an audience, it is best not to show her manners and actions. Don't have time to explore. Klein stretched out his right hand. Structure and visible contact. Communication between the two familiar crimson stars. On the deep blue sea of Sunia, an ancient sailing boat sailed with the wind. Alger Wilson locked himself in the captain's cabin and let the ghost ship give him the highest level of protection, the pocket watch. In front of him was spread out, and he walked along beside the brass sextant. Not happy enough, but nervous as soon as the hour hand, minute hand and second hand pointed to the right position. Alger Wilson's eyes burst into crimson, ignoring the layers of protection, alas. His sigh echoed in the captain's room. Backlinda, Queen's, Audrey Hall leaned against the velvet pillow and looked at the yellow-brown paper in her hand again. The jewel-like eyes seemed to hide two slowly rotating soul whirlpools. Her eyes were calm and cold, as if waiting for the performance of a drama. Crimson broke out, and she looked down at herself and was swallowed up. Above the fog, in the grand palace, the long bronze table is mottled and ancient. As soon as Audrey Hall's figure appeared, Klein, who had opened second sight earlier, looked at it. Not surprisingly, he saw that the colors in the depths of each other's aura blended into one, becoming pure and quiet as a lake that clearly reflected things. She really became an extraordinary person. Klein was looking away and suddenly found that the high-backed chair belonging to Miss Justice had changed. The bright stars on the back of the chair move rapidly, forming an illusory constellation that does not belong to reality. In Klein's eyes, this constellation is so familiar because it is a symbol in mysticism, a symbol of the dragon, the audience. Dragon. Klein controlled himself without shaking his head and looked inquiringly at the high-backed seat of Upside Down. And normally, from the perspective of his sight, he can't see the back of the chair, but this is his home court, and everything is presented according to his will. The constellation behind the seat has not changed, but Klein, who has entered the occult, is no longer as ignorant as before and recognizes it as a symbol of storm. Sailors see relatives, storms. That's no problem. The color in the depths of the Upside Down aura is much purer. Has he been promoted? By the way, what is the symbol behind my seat? Klein endured the impulse. As before, he tapped the edge of the long table 3 times, smiled and said, "Congratulations, Miss Justice. You are an extraordinary person." He can see it directly. Audrey dazed, little smile way. Thank you, Mr. Fool. Thank you, Mr. Hanging Upside Down. Faster than I thought. Alger Wilson said frankly. Klein didn't continue this topic, knocked the eyebrows and said with a smile, "Madam, sir, have you found Rozelle's diary?" Chapter 59. Russell's initial hearing the question of fool. Audrey didn't answer it as soon as before, but looked at Upside Down, with her crystal eyes open. Alger unconsciously convergence body movements. Silence for a few seconds after said, "I found 2 pages of Russell the Great's diary and remembered their contents." "I have a page." Audrey, whose eyes are separated by fog, replied in a bystander tone, "Very good." Klein didn't let his joy and disappointment infect his voice. He is glad that there are 3 pages, but disappointed that there are only 3 pages, because the first collection is definitely relatively easy, and it is an excavation of his own resources and channel potential. When it is followed up, it will become more and more difficult and involve more factors. Shall we express it now? Audrey asked quietly, yes. Klein nodded concisely. He maintained his previous posture and hardly changed. He must be cautious in front of the audience. With his voice down, Audrey and Alger instantly emerged in front of tawny parchment and dark red pen. The 2 men picked up their writing tools and began to recall the symbols in their minds, giving them the emotions they urgently express. Silently, there are lines of words on the yellow-brown parchment. Some are upright, some are delicate, and some are crooked. In less than a minute, Audrey and Alger forcibly wrote down all the rubbings. Klein's mind moved, and the 3 pages of parchment flashed into his hand. Glancing at it, he scanned the diary and found that the language order was reversed, and there were missing words and typos in the content. However, experiments have proved that a certain degree of sequence error does not affect Chinese reading, and he is not afraid of missing words and typos after suffering from asterisks. On April 8th, I stood at the bow of the Black Throne, with open arms, and said to Green and Edwards, "Do you want my treasure? Then come to the end of the misty sea and look for it. I have hidden all my treasures here." They don't understand my humor at all, and even ask me if I really have extra treasure. It's really boring. You can't be my 4 horsemen of the apocalypse like this. On April 11th, I found an unknown island that is not on the safe passage, with many extraordinary species on it. No, I prefer to call them extraordinary species, which is more compelling. In addition to them, there are many strange creatures on the island. I think if Darwin crosses over, there will be no way to right evolution. On April 15th, Green became a little strange. Was he infected by something? When did Russell the Great, who was born in the Kingdom of India, sail? The Misty Sea should be the Na Pianhai Ocean in the west of the Republic of India. Well, I have to go to the library to find some historical materials to compare. Klein quickly read a page and turned his attention to the back. At this point, he no longer concealed his understanding of the secret symbol of Roselle the Great, because it was an act that conformed to the identity of a fool, while Audrey and Alger didn't speak, sitting there quietly waiting. They seemed to be not surprised at the result, and even thought that this was the right thing to do. On October 2nd, they decided to let me get engaged to Matilda of able family without consulting me beforehand. God, I haven't even met her yet. No, I want to refuse. Even if I run away from home, even if I am self-reliant and oppressed from now on, I will resist this arranged marriage. On October 5th, Miss Matilda was so beautiful. On October 6th, her personality and temperament were all my favorite types, and I began to look forward to our marriage. Hey, Emperor, where's your moral integrity? Klein leaned back in his high-backed chair to keep his emotions from penetrating the fog. He found that the early Roselle didn't keep a diary every day. Generally, when something happened, he needed to vomit, record, and express his emotions before he started writing. Looking down, Klein looked at the last article of the diary on this page. On October 9th, they actually called me the Son of Steam, and I like it very much. Seeing the contents of the first 2 pages is of little value for the time being, and Klein is inevitably a little disappointed. But he didn't lose heart. He changed the diary on the 3rd page to the top, and the contents were written on both sides of this page. On May 21st, the Church of the God of Craftsmen gave me 2 choices. One is the Generalist, which belongs to the complete sequence chain they have mastered, and the other is the Spy, which was obtained from the Mosaic Penance Society and lacked a higher sequence. On May 22nd, my choice is very simple. Generalist. A generalist with a complete sequence. Although mastering more mysterious knowledge will help me find a way to go home, the problem is that when I am not strong enough, I must rely on external forces to cross this kind of thing, and whether the external forces are good or bad, uncontrollable, and very dangerous. In this case, I might as well make myself strong and go back on my own, so the complete sequence is the primary factor I consider. On May 23rd, I became a generalist. With the power of potions, I actually recalled the knowledge I had learned before, physics, chemistry, and so on. Not only do I recall, but I also deeply understand and master them. Haha, this is simply a career tailored for me as a foreign visitor, which can maximize my advantages. I have to say that if I go back in the state and return to the 3rd year of high school, I will definitely become the champion. If there is more standardized and in-depth professional study, scientists are not too difficult. On May 26th, I enjoyed being a generalist. A strange thing is that when I pretend to be a generalist and do everything in line with its positioning, the whispers that make me almost crazy are quieter, and my temper that breaks out from time to time is also controlled, and I think of the diary. This is the mysterious Mr. Zarathustra figure mentioned to me play. This may be the key to solving the hidden dangers of potions. Klein looked at this page of the diary and felt that there were obvious differences in personality and style between himself and Russell the Great, for example. In the matter of going home, I think more about avoiding danger and achieving my goal by mastering occult knowledge in depth, while Russell the Great's idea is to hold the danger in his hand by himself. I have to say, sometimes I quite envy this kind of person. Perhaps everyone will be eager for something that they don't have. Of course, I also want to consider things that are strong, and both hands should be hard. One by one, thoughts came to Klein's mind, which made him sigh, and Russell the Great's description of the reduction of potions' hidden dangers gave him a lot of confidence in last night's summary and a clearer grasp of the essence of playing. Put down 3 pages of diary, Klein looked up at Justice and upside down, slightly laughed. Sorry, I was fascinated. Audrey's smooth inner envy, indifferently say with smile. I can understand, and I look forward to exchanging the contents of Roselle's diary from you one day. That's a price to pay. Klein glanced at the word justice with a smile and swept the silent upside down. Audrey hands handshake, placed in front of Way. Mr. Fool, Mr. Swindler, I have 3 questions to ask. If you think the answers are of high value, just tell me what you want, and I will try my best to find them later. No problem. Alger answered simply and steadily. Klein nodded gently and leaned back more comfortably. Audrey thought for a few seconds. The first question, what does play mean? I found that the residual spirit in the potion had a slight influence on me. Is it because I have been playing the audience all this time? Alger didn't speak, turned his attention to the fool, and seemed to be waiting for an answer. Klein tapped on the edge of the long table with his fingers and said easily, let me use a more vivid example to illustrate it. The core strength of the cereal potions is a well-guarded castle. Those residual spirits that will cause self-loathing live in the castle. Our goal is to solve it and truly become the owner of the castle. We have 2 methods now. One is to attack by force. This may not be successful, but it will definitely hurt ourselves unless it is crushed by absolute advantage, but obviously we don't have it. In the second way, we have an invitation letter from the owner of the castle. This invitation letter allows us to sneak into the castle through the guard's interrogation and easily get rid of the enemy. But the problem is that this invitation letter has the appearance characteristics and corresponding temperament description of the guests. Therefore, we must disguise ourselves and play as invited guests. Got it? Alger, like early speculation, immediately asks, that invitation is the name of the cereal potions? Yes. Klein gave a positive answer. Audrey heard a burst of suddenly, feel fully understand the meaning of play, and a little emotional she immediately out of the state of audience, delighted to praise Wei. It's really an outstanding method. I think it fits your title very well. Its style is very harmonious with Fool. I had no idea that playing would work like this. Fortunately, I have been instinctively playing audience these days. She paused and added, I think this is a very valuable answer. I can't accept it with peace of mind. What kind of exchange do you need, Mr. Fool? Of course, I remember that I still owe you a page from the diary of Roselle the Great. More Roselle diaries or... Klein paused. He originally wanted to say anything about the sequence of soothsayers, but he felt that this low-level requirement would destroy the image of fools, so he gave up temporarily and planned to find an opportunity to ask without trace in the future. Anyway, it didn't take long for me to be promoted, and I haven't completely digested the soothsayer potion. He comforted himself and quietly added, or anything about the Antigone family, even what I knew before. Alger, silent for a few seconds, carefully look at the bronze long table first, Heavy Slow said, Mr. Fool, then I can pay for your answer now. Chapter 60, the second piece of Slate Blasphemy. No problem. Klein tried to keep his tone low. He put his left elbow on the arm of the high-back chair, and his fingers held his forehead slightly tilted, posing as a calm listener. Alger, consider the language way. Antigonus is an ancient family, and their history can even be traced back to the era of catastrophe before the Quaternary, which is related to the second blasphemy slate. The second blasphemy slate? Can there be a second piece of blasphemy slate? How many pieces does it have? Klein's eyes narrowed, and he almost changed his posture. According to what was said before, hanging people upside down and justice, there are 22 ways of God recorded on blasphemy slate. There are 2 or even more such important items. 22 ways of God. Sequential ways. Can these 2 nouns be equated? Every complete sequence of paths is the path to the throne of God. In an instant, Klein came up with one idea after another because of the description of the second piece of blasphemy slate. He believed that his emotional reaction would have been discovered by the audience if it had not been covered by a strong gray fog. As for the term catastrophe era, he is no stranger as a professional, which is synonymous with a tertiary. After this period of review, Klein even learned that the tertiary period is divided into 2 eras, the glorious era and the disaster era, the second blasphemy slate. Audrey made no secret of her doubts. She has not calmed down and completely returned to the audience. State, good question. Klein secretly drank a lottery for Miss Justice. This is a question that is inconvenient to ask as a fool. Alger glanced at the eye fool and saw that the other person's posture had not changed, and there was no noise to stop it. So he thought of the next way. The first blasphemous slate appeared in the Dark Ages, that is, in the second period when we human beings struggled to survive under the protection of gods, and the second blasphemous slate appeared at the end of the third period. It can even be said that its appearance marked the end of the disaster era. The information of these 2-foot blasphemous tablets is strictly kept secret by the 7 churches. I only know one thing, only that they all involve the way of God, and I don't know what the difference is between them. Is the blasphemy tablet that Roselle the Great saw the first or the second? Audrey asked curiously. Hearing this, Klein recalled Alger's description of the names of potions at the first party. He said that the names of the cereal potions all came from desecrating the slate. Similarly, the captain also mentioned that the formation and perfection of the potion system depends on the birth of the blasphemous slate, which indirectly proves that the way of God is the sequential way. Klein made a silent answer to his question just now. At this time, upside down Alger simply said, the second piece. Audrey's eyes turned quiet, and she entered the state of audience again. She didn't ask questions again, but looked at upside down intently. This see Alger quite uncomfortable. He endured the mood in my heart. Voice slowly continued. During the Solomon dynasty in the Quaternary, although the Antigonus family was also a prominent aristocrat, it did not leave an impressive story. It was not until they supported the establishment of the Tudor Empire that they really stood in the center of the northern mainland stage. At that time, ancient names such as Antigone, Ammon, Abraham, and Jacob shone in the country of mankind, but after the War of the 4 Emperors, the blood emperors of Tudor Empire fell, and they fell to the peak and were hunted by the 7 gods today. I don't know the specific process. I only know that the Antigonus family finally fell into the hands of the Night Church. Mr. Fool, if you want to know more, I'm afraid you can only get it from the Night Church or get in touch with those ancient secret organizations. You know which ones I mean. I don't know. Klein heart-bitter nodded. The Priory will count as 1. The Moss penance mentioned by the captain and Old Neil will count as 1, and the psychological alchemy will not know if it counts. He silently inventory. Alger gives the final message. I don't know which sequence path the Antigone family has mastered, but in the relevant description, there are 2 adjectives that appear repeatedly, that is, weird and terrible. Weird and terrible. Think about that note. Think about what happened to the original owner and his classmates and Riel Bieber's mother, which is really appropriate. Klein tapped the edge of the long table with a finger of his other hand for several times in a row, then he said in a low voice, Very well, I am very satisfied with this reward. The reason why he wants to tap the long table with his fingers repeatedly now is to strengthen this action, so that Justice and Upside Down can believe that they have the habit of tapping something, so as to cover up the opening and closing of Second Sight. It's my pleasure. Alger didn't mention anything else. Audrey looked at the Upside Down, then at the Fool, little smile way. Then I asked the second question, what are the names of the follow-up potions of audience? Where can I find clues? I also want to ask directly, but different choices will bear different problems. Klein didn't open his mouth and turned his attention to Upside Down. Alger was silent for a few seconds. I will answer this question for free, because I led you to this path. The following Sequence 8 of audience is called Mind Reader, and the ancient name of Sequence 7 is Psychoanalyst, and now it is described as Psychologist. This is what I learned from a member of the Psychological Alchemy Association. I think they should have many potions in this way. Psychological alchemy. Psychic, Daly quite agreed with some of their theories, while the captain thought it was evil and crazy. Klein listened thoughtfully. Do you know the whereabouts of the psychological alchemist now? Audrey asked with bright eyes. Both mind readers and psychologists are quite in line with her aesthetics. Alger a rare smile. Yes, he sank near Sunia Island. I sank it myself. If you want to find a psychological alchemy club, then I can only say sorry, the clue is broken. He is not worried that Justice will determine his identity through the description just now because he did it alone. Heavy. Audrey didn't know what expression and language to use. She took a deep breath, suddenly unable to keep the audience state, and said a little shyly, the third question, if an ordinary animal drinks the potions of Sequence 9, what will happen? What the hell is this problem? Klein's fingers propped on his forehead tapped the eyebrows without showing any trace. Soon, he saw from the change of color that Audrey was a little flustered, nervous, and ashamed. Did she do something stupid like that? Klein thought, slightly startled, and didn't feel strange. After 2 previous parties, he determined that Miss Justice had this gene. Hanging upside down, Alger obviously froze, and it took a while to say, ordinary animals don't have human brains and can't learn to meditate in the first place. Therefore, there is a high probability that they will die on the spot or collapse into monsters. But if they survive, they should become extraordinary creatures. If magic drugs can improve their thinking ability, they will even become smart. Okay. Audrey spat silently and nodded in a relaxed tone. I don't have any other questions. Alger thought for a moment and didn't mention Aurora and Listener, also shake head away. Me neither. I have one thing. Klein kept his posture unchanged and said with a smile, this needs your cooperation. Before he closed Second Sight, he immediately found that, hanging upside down revealed obvious tension, and Miss Justice, who was heartless before, was a little more afraid and cautious before they speak. Klein calm way. Don't worry, a small matter, if successful, will be very helpful to you, so I won't pay extra. You speak. Audrey instinctively entered the audience's state, but she couldn't see through the thick fog around the Fool. Follow your will. Alger to stabilize. Sync of voice said. Klein fingers gently move, smile and said, as I said before, some attempt should be made so that you can ask for leave in advance without worrying about what to do on an inappropriate occasion on Monday afternoon. This is exactly what we want. Audrey's eyebrows widened. Alger thought for a moment. What do you need us to do? You can try a ritual magic in your spare time, without being too formal. Just have an undisturbed environment. Put 4 new candles on the altar, which are located in the 4 corners, and it is best to use the kind with sandalwood flavor. Put a white bread in the candle at the upper left, a nepote noodle in the candle at the upper right, paella at the lower left, and Dixie pie at the lower right. Use a silver knife to make one. Klein described his ritual magic from the transit ceremony, and taught Miss Justice how to create a spiritual environment for Frida. To be honest, because the target is himself, Klein believes that the front part, that is, the sacrificial part that interests the corresponding existence and pleases them, can be omitted directly, but he still tries to make the process look like that. Of course, it doesn't conform to the old Neil saying that the gods are 2, and the gods are 3. With the moon flower, golden mint, deep sleep flower, golden hand orange and rock rose mixed distillation, extracted into essential oil. Drop a drop on each candle. Audrey listened with great interest, recorded, and finally asked, what about mantras? Mr. Fool, where is the corresponding mantra?